Today, Donald Trump is the most salient person in American politics. Everything from one degree to another is about Trump, and it all started on June 16, 2015. Trump went from being a real estate mogul and reality TV star who occasionally dabbled in politics to crushing his foes in the Republican primary debates, to winning the majority of that party's support, to beating Hillary Clinton in the general election. The rest is history. But history wasn't inevitable. What if Donald Trump didn't win? What if he failed to get the nomination, or if Clinton somehow beat him? Well, this is What, Why, How, and that's what the video is about. So first, let's cover who Trump was before June 2015. This guy was a successful businessman who closely tied himself with his branding. Trump Tower, Trump Steaks, Trump University, so on. A poll from back in the day shows that over 90% of Republicans knew about Trump. Name recognition is necessary if you want to win an election, so he's got the first step down. But Trump tried to win the presidency before and obviously failed. Back in 2000, for example, he ran for the Reform Party, but dropped out pretty quickly. Afterward, he joined the Democratic Party. Trump has always been politically mercurial. I don't think he actually holds many political beliefs close to his heart. He's not an ideologue, he's a demagogue and a camera hog. The big change for the Big Donald came after the Great Recession and the election of Barack Obama. Trump went from endorsing Hillary Clinton in the 2008 Democratic primary to endorsing McCain in the general, to leaving the Dems altogether and spreading conspiracy theories about Obama's birthplace. He began floating a campaign for president in 2010, focusing on economic protectionism. You know his usual stump speech. China's beating us on trade, we don't win anymore, they're laughing at us, so on. But Trump quickly dropped out of the race, probably because he wanted to keep his cushy gig hosting The Apprentice. After Mitt Romney got beat, Trump started gearing up for another grab at the presidency, speaking at CPAC in 2013 and focusing again on trade issues. Nationalism meets economics. In June 2015, he launched his campaign for the Republican nomination in a speech which hit a new yet resonant tone: immigration. You know how the story goes. His harsh language, combined with his willingness to play tough against his rivals.
First of all, Rand Paul shouldn't even be on this stage. He's number 11. He's got 1% in the polls.
Led to Trump pulling to the front of the pack by July, surpassing Jeb Bush. In October, Trump swept aside a surge by the neurosurgeon Ben Carson, then a last-ditch effort by Texas Senator Ted Cruz of the Tea Party movement. That was the Republican primary of 2016. So how could Trump have lost? He could just have not chosen to run in the first place. Trump opted not to run in 2012, for example, but he probably thought he had a better chance in 2016 against presumptive Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton, who was, after all, the subject of 30 years of derision. If Trump does run in the first place, his outlandish and boisterous personality wouldn't click as much on a smaller stage. That is, if there weren't 15 major candidates, the other leading guys, Cruz, Bush, and Marco Rubio, would have been able to get more airtime and therefore more attention. A circus needs a clown, but you know what, a clown also needs a circus. It also would have helped if some of the candidates dropped out of the race earlier. Marco Rubio's supporters, for example, much preferred Ted Cruz over Donald Trump, according to polls. That's the pathway right there. Here's the key moment. Marco Rubio was polling in the mid-teens in South Carolina, a key early state, until Governor Nikki Haley endorsed him days before the primary. He leaped ahead of Ted Cruz and came in second, giving him the juice he needed to keep going until Florida, and then he dropped out. If Nikki Haley instead endorsed Ted Cruz, she basically did in real life after Lil Marco fell apart, then Cruz might have leapt ahead in South Carolina and narrowly won the state instead of Trump, taking its 50 delegates. Marco Rubio might then just drop out, just like Jeb Bush and Chris Christie. Rubio's voters would go instead to Ted Cruz, who would quickly have a burst of energy just in time for Super Tuesday. Arkansas, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Texas, and Virginia just barely would go to Cruz, but Trump keeps a hold of Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Massachusetts, and Vermont. In real life, Trump didn't win Super Tuesday by that much. In this scenario, Cruz wins it narrowly. The anti-Trump vote then flocks to Cruz, seeing him as the best chance for a normal, albeit hardline, conservative, and kinda uncharismatic nominee. It would also help if the Access Hollywood tape, which almost cost Trump the election against Hillary Clinton, was dropped during the primaries instead. According to TMZ, so take it with a grain of salt, NBC had the tape but waited until October to drop it. If they dropped it earlier, or if it leaked, Trump likely would have buckled in the primaries when he was more vulnerable. In March, Ted Cruz continues to gain momentum, taking states that he narrowly lost in real life, including Kentucky, Louisiana, Illinois, Missouri, and North Carolina. Trump catches up in April after winning the primaries of the northeastern states, though Cruz notably wins Indiana in May. In real life, Indiana fell to Trump, marking his victory, but in this scenario, the race continues. By the convention in mid-July, no candidate has won a majority, but Ted Cruz has the most. Okay, so the Republican convention in Cleveland is then contested between Trump and Cruz, and then we got John Kasich in a distant third place. On the first ballot, nobody wins a majority, leaving the candidates and their agents to rush into frantic negotiations in smoke-filled back rooms. Cruz and Kasich successfully form an alliance, with Cruz offering Kasich the VP slot in exchange for his support. The GOP leaders secretly christen the union. Cruz and the Ohio governor win on the second ballot and are the Republican nominees for president and vice president. This inevitably enrages Donald Trump. He condemns the GOP as corrupt and leaves the convention in a huff, refusing to concede or endorse Ted Cruz.
Cruz and Kasich have just joined forces. I said, oh, really? They did, huh? That's called collusion. Collusion. You know, in a lot of businesses, if you collude, it's illegal. Only in politics can you do stuff like this.
Then the general election begins. Trump launches a campaign to get on the ballot as the head of the new Patriot Party. He's passed the deadline in a whole bunch of states, but he might get on in at least a couple key swing states that have charitable deadlines. Elsewhere, he runs a write-in campaign. His name recognition helps a whole lot. As the general election campaign season begins, Trump saps Cruz's support and donors too. He finds the most support among the ideologically flexible populists, you know the type, and the radical right in the northern half of the country. Cruz keeps a tight grip on traditional conservatives and the South, however. In national polls, Trump peaks at 25% and above Cruz in several northeastern states. This popularity gets Trump on the debate stage, which goes, basically as well as you could expect. The debates descend into a shouting match, especially between Trump and Cruz over their grudge. Clinton comes out looking pretty good, though she is humbled when FBI Director Comey announces he's investigating her in October. Then, on November 8th, 2016, Americans cast their ballots. Trump gets over 20% of the vote in Maine, New York, West Virginia, Iowa, and North Dakota. In New York, he gets more support than Ted Cruz, and in West Virginia, he gets more support than Clinton. This is enough to flip Iowa to Hillary, despite the fact that she only gets around 39% of the vote, as well as the other swing states of Ohio, Arizona, Georgia, and Florida all shifting to Clinton's column. Here's that map. The closest states are Georgia, which Clinton wins by about 3,000 voters, pretty close, and North Carolina, which Cruz wins by about 13,000. Now, it wouldn't be really quite right to say that the blue wall, the legendary blue wall everyone was talking about, holds in 2016. More so, the wall falls, but the enemy at the gate is too busy fighting itself to attack. Nationwide, Trump gets around 11% of the vote, Cruz gets around 38%, and Clinton 47%. The Libertarians and the Green Party also get around 4% too. When the results are tallied, conservatives and the GOP establishment are enraged at Donald Trump for taking the election from them. They condemn him as a New York interloper and a con man. However, he does continue to have supporters in the party, especially newcomers to politics. When the electors eventually cast their votes, he gets a faithless elector from North Dakota, South Dakota, and 2 from West Virginia. Clinton also loses a couple of leftist faithless electors, but not enough to actually do anything big. While it might sound outlandish, this is basically what happened in 1992 and 1996 when independent businessman Ross Perot ran against Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush, taking 19% and 8% of the vote for those years. So, come January 20th, 2017, it's Hillary Clinton, not Donald Trump, being sworn in as President of the United States. There's an orderly transition of power between Obama and the first female president, but Clinton's presidency wouldn't really be that peachy at all. For one, Congress would be Republican and pissed that Clinton snatched the presidency from them. Expect filibustering on any bill backed by Clinton. It's up in the air if she'd even be able to fill the empty Supreme Court slot too, but you know what, I figure the Senate would eventually bow to pressure, so Clinton would probably renominate Merrick Garland, who becomes an Associate Justice. Notably, of course, all the executive orders and controversial bills signed by Trump wouldn't be signed by Clinton. She'd veto any Muslim ban, any major tax cut, or Obamacare repeal. But Clinton and Congress would have to make a compromise in order to avoid a government shutdown in her first 100 days. So don't expect her to devote large sums of tax money to any progressive programs. This pisses off the left. The only thing President Clinton and the Republican Congress would agree on is increasing the military budget, really. When it comes to foreign policy, Clinton definitely wouldn't meet Kim Jong-un, but she definitely would still bomb Syria and ISIS. Unlike Trump, Clinton would stay in the Paris Agreement, NAFTA, and the Iran deal, so America still has a positive image across the world. But Clinton would probably still back out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership like she said she would, so that pisses off some East Asian countries. Meanwhile, Clinton attempts to get a signature bill passed during her first 100 days to say that she did anything. She gets a minor tax cut for green energy and some other tax credits, but her attempts to pass immigration reform inevitably falls flat due to Republican opposition. The 2018 midterms, as a result, are a bloodbath. On the Republican side, pro-Trump primary challengers attempt to overthrow establishment politicians, taking dozens of scalps in the House. Meanwhile, Democrats, unable to escape the sinking Clinton presidency, lose 20 or so seats. In the Senate, Republicans keep a hold of all their seats and even flip West Virginia, Sac and Joe Manchin. As the dust clears, Republicans have 57 seats in the Senate and around 261 in the House. That's enough to stop Clinton directly in her tracks and even launch some real toothy investigations into all her financial dealings. So that's going to be a major issue come 2020. Seeing Clinton's vulnerability, a dozen Republicans launched campaigns for president, including Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, Mark Sanford, Jeff Flake, Marco Rubio, and, inevitably, Donald Trump.
Oh, Don, you're a little controversial. You're talking about illegal immigration. I said it's illegal.
As the campaign season takes off, a new challenge confronts President Clinton, the COVID-19 pandemic. Clinton would probably take a stricter path than her 2016 rival. She'd activate emergency powers sooner, sound the alarm sooner, and press states to go into lockdown when Trump didn't. This also means that the pandemic is politicized earlier and to a greater extent. You can imagine exactly how that would turn out. Denialism, conspiracy theories, to a greater extent than real life. I'll leave 2020 a bit of a mystery. Who do you think would win the Republican nomination? Would they beat Clinton? And how would they react to Russia invading Ukraine? User SEQ, Sadie Bubs, and Ethan W. Monster, for $1 a month you can get your names in the credit too. Thanks so much. Adios.
Bing, bing, bong, bong, bing, bing, bing. You know what that is, right?